790 KABC.
Welcome back. Ledger on the Law, 790 KABC. We are talking about the law of unintended consequences, and we're here to talk you off the legal ledge. 800-222-5222. If you are the victim of an unintended consequence, something that is it relates to the law and not just the social factor, call us right now, 800-222-KABC. Later in the show, Phil, we have Alan Gervey on the air with us. He's our workers' comp attorney who is often on, and he has said point blank that he has spotted some laws that have unintended consequences as they relate to workers' comp. Stephen R. Golden is going to be joined by attorney Adina Turman in our second hour. But without further ado, we have our resident extraordinaire malpractice attorney, Carl McMahon. Carl, welcome to Ledger on the Law.
Thanks, Emery. Great to be here.
Voltaire said it's dangerous to be right when the government is wrong. And in my past couple seatings with you on the air here, you've really educated me on micro law. And before we even go on, explain what micro is to our listeners that weren't listening to the previous segments.
Yes, Emery, thank you. We have discussed this, but basically this was a law, Medical Insurance Compensation Reform Act, that was passed in 1975, nearly 38 years ago. And I suppose keeping with the theme of the show of good intentions, or the best intentions, it was passed for a perceived crisis in the medical healthcare industry back then of insurance premiums being too high and so on and so forth. It's never been adjusted for inflation. In fact, the original author, Barry Keene, who was a senator at the time, it was called the Keene Bill, had an inflation factor in the bill, which for some odd reason got dropped out of passage. So even Mr. Keene has come out now, nearly 38 years later, and said it was a mistake to begin with. It should have had an inflation factor. The consequence of the unintended bad consequence, in my strong view, is that we have this outdated law on the books, which never had an inflation factor, admitted by its own author, which now is extremely unfair to medical victims in the state of California with a $250,000 cap on pain and suffering.
I think it's very important that our listeners understand that this is not something that this is not a dated law from 75 that is written in stone. This is something that you're up in Sacramento trying to change right now. And you're up in Sacramento with a gentleman who's not an attorney. His name is Bob Pack. And Bob Pack is an internet guru. He founded a very large company, doesn't need to be named on the air, but he lost his children to a doctor that was overprescribing medication. Is that right?
That's correct, Emery. It's a very sad story, and we're going to have Mr. Pack on, as I understand it, shortly. And I haven't met Mr. Pack, but I admire him from afar for what he's doing and the courage and his convictions. What happened, and of course I'll let Mr. Pack tell the story. I don't mean to step on his toes or be presumptuous, but this is a gentleman whose young children, ages 7 and 10, I believe, were killed by a driver who had been receiving overprescription of medications. This has been a hot topic in the LA Times lately, as you know, where the LA Times has basically been doing investigative reporting and has determined that physicians throughout the state of California are overprescribing medications, resulting in their patients' deaths, and in this case, the deaths of others, and how ineffective, if you will, the California Medical Board is in policing that. So this dovetails in with MICRA, because MICRA is supposed to be the teeth of our law here in California to prohibit this kind of conduct, and we don't have any law that really does that.
Now, Carl, when you say prohibit, you mean stopping it before there's a death. But when there is a death, can the doctor still be charged, or is that not even possible?
Well, the doctor can be charged, but once again, here's Mr. Pack, who after this happened, of course, the driver was criminally prosecuted and is doing 30 years of prison time. But Mr. Pack wanted to try to make a difference in the memory of his children, by the way. Mr. Pack...
And I think the important thing here, because when you use the word attorney or lawyer, some lay people are suspect that the attorneys are doing this for the money. This is their job. This is how they make their living. They live in some big houses, and they do everything for money. The difference here is that Mr. Pack is a non-attorney who said, I'm going to spend money to change this law in honor of my children.
Well, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. I mean, thanks for.
So there's no ulterior motive. There's nothing
There's
to
zero
suggest
ulterior motive. Not to embarrass Mr. Pack, but he founded a well-known internet company. It's not the money to him. His story, as I think he'll tell you, is he went out and tried to find a lawyer, as we've discussed in this show many times, and couldn't find a lawyer to prosecute this case against the physicians because of the $250,000 cap.
Well, let's stop talking about Mr. Pack behind his back to hundreds of thousands of people. Let's bring him on the air. Bob Pack, welcome to Ledger on the Law.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Well, we've kind of we've introed and teased your story, and I know it must be difficult for you even years after the event to discuss it. But you have been so brave and are doing so much good. We really appreciate you coming on the air with us. But could you give our listeners just a recap of what the horror you've lived through?
Well, yeah, I'd be happy to. It's been 9 years now since the death of my two children. It was basically a really hot Indian summer day in my town of Danville, California, where my wife took my two children, my 10-year-old son Troy and my 7-year-old daughter Alana, out for a walk after dinner to get an ice cream, which we had done many times before. On this early evening, a woman, a middle-aged woman, driving in the opposite direction, crossed over 3 lanes and drove off the road down the sidewalk, hitting my children and wife. My wife survived. My two children were killed.
I'm so sorry.
And I raced to the scene and tried to revive the children and tried to help with CPR until the paramedics arrived. But they both were pretty much, killed instantly. And that, started a new life for me. I learned of different things that were going on that impacted me in California, and one of them was the micro law, because during the prosecution of the woman driver, she had been receiving thousands of Schedule 2 and 3 narcotic drugs like Vicodin.
Thousands?
Yeah, thousands from her HMO, and all from the same medical office. Many different doctors who worked at the hospital were writing prescriptions willy-nilly to her for thousands of Vicodin pills. And she was an addict, and she also had a drinking problem. And so prior to the accident, she had consumed, so many, it's unbelievable. But she was taking muscle relaxants, vodka, Vicodin, all that afternoon when she...
Phil, sorry to interrupt you, Mr. Pack. Phil, a lot of our listeners listen to the radio while they have their laptops on their lap. They're at their house right now. If you have a computer in front of you, go to 38istolate.com. This story is heartbreaking. Troy and Alana Pack passed away because a doctor was overprescribing medication. Mr. Pack is not in this for the money. Mr. Pack, is it true that I learned you had a hard time even finding a medical malpractice lawyer because of this micro law?
Yeah, I mean, I set out to contact numerous attorneys. I think it was around 10, and all of them turned me down because of the micro law, and which I was unfamiliar with when I first started calling and contacting, and it was a real punch in the gut to be victimized twice, losing my children, and then finding out because of this micro law that I couldn't pursue justice. And for me, it wasn't about the money. I had a very successful career in technology, and so I was looking more for accountability from the HMO that was doing all the prescribing, and I was hoping that I could bring accountability and change of practices that would be safer for consumers through prescribing of narcotics. But I couldn't get that. And
there's no doubt this is about justice and not money. 800-222-5222. 800-222 KABC. If you want to chime in, think this outdated law from 1975 that didn't even have an inflation adjustment to it, let alone some practical exceptions when we have complete negligence of some doctors. Some doctors are absolutely, legalized drug dealers, and I think we're going to go into that after a short break. Mr. Pack, will you stay with us over the break?
Okay, sure.
You're listening to Ledger on the Law, 790 KABC. I'll be right back.
This is the News and Talk Authority, 790 KABC.
Thanks for staying with us. Ledger on the Law, 790 KABC. Phil, there are two top reasons the law of unintended consequences works. It's that the framers of social change are either ignorant of possible far-reaching effects of the law, or they make errors when they develop a change that doesn't have the effects that they desired. And it sounds like a Wikipedia spiel there, and it is, but it makes sense.
It does make sense.
When you talk about the general good of people, and with no criminal intent, our legislators are up in Washington, they're up in Sacramento, very good intentioned, but sometimes the law doesn't keep up with the times, and compromise often destroys really good bills. When it sounds like the author of this bill suggested that there be an inflation factor written into it, and then it's left out, you have to say that that was through some sort of compromise. Let's bring Bob Pack on the air. Bob, you're back with us. Can you hear us?
Yep, I'm here. Thank you.
And attorney Carl McMahon. Carl, your law firm, it was one of the unsung heroes that would have taken Bob's case had he reached out to you. You guys did not meet until after he had already started spending his own money in this effort to change this law. But tell us about your law firm and how you interact with Micra.
Well, thank you, Emery. Nice to meet you, Mr. Pack, over the telephone.
Yeah, nice to meet you.
I look forward to meeting you in person one of these days. I have great respect for what you're doing, and my sincere condolences for what you've gone through with regard to your family.
Yeah,
yes, my firm, Mr. Pack, still we're stupid enough to still take medical malpractice cases. There's very few of us that do, but I don't know if you recall in your research, but Micra was originally called the Anti-Harney Bill, and he was my mentor, Dave Harney, and we did medical malpractice. So we've been involved with this fight ever since, I started practicing law. This law has been in existence, so we've been doing this for a long time. So we're kindred spirits, and I hope we can do something to change this. Now, my understanding is that you are involved in an initiative process now to do something about this at the legislative level. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Basically, I have brought on a coalition of partners and begun the process of drafting a ballot measure, an initiative that will appear on the 2014 ballot. And the initiative is, we're titling it the Troy and Alana Pack Patient Safety Act. And this initiative it has several components to it, but the major component is we're going to try to overturn the Micra law. And personally, I believe, and some of our partners believe, that it's unconstitutional, the Micra law. The Constitution is very clear that provides everyone equal is the key, equal access to justice and the court system. And now we have a law that doesn't allow that. And so even though Micra has been challenged in the state Supreme Court, we're going to attempt to overturn it. And so that's what our ballot initiative is about.
Well, thank you. Yes, and my firm has been involved in the constitutional challenge.
And I think one of the things, not only equal access to the courts, it's the Seventh Amendment, right to have a jury decide the value of the case, not the court. I mean, the Seventh Amendment is not some afterthought. It's really
that's what I don't understand. As a kind of layman, I'm not a lawyer, but how does the legislature have a right to override the law with legislation? In
1993, I had a case against a local hospital here whose name I won't mention, but two twins were stillborn through absolute negligence of the nurses for not checking the fetal monitor. I took the case to trial, and the jury awarded $1,250,000 to these poor parents who saw their twins die on the fetal monitor machine.
Oh, boy.
And that was their verdict. It was 12-0 on liability, 12-0 on causation, and 12-0 on damages, $1,250,000. The judge, without a motion from the defense, cut the verdict to $250,000 and then assessed the jury found 25% negligence on a non-named party. The verdict ended up being $187,500. So if that's not a circumvention of the Seventh Amendment, I don't know what is. And I spoke to the jurors afterwards. After this happened, we went and had lunch, and they were shocked and dismayed and very angry that their hard work in that case, it was a 3-week trial, 4-week trial, their hard work away from their jobs and their families got flushed down the toilet by Micro.
You see that? Now, and I want to bring something up that Mr. Pack actually said last segment, because it really, for me, it was the crux of it. And you said you felt like you were, after the accident, you felt like you were victimized twice. I think that's such an important distinction, because I actually would submit that you were victimized 3 times. You were victimized by the woman who hit your family. You were victimized by this law, and you were victimized by the medical community or the pharmaceutical community, whoever you want to blame for making this even possible, that this woman was so over-medicated. And people have to understand that this can happen to anybody right now. Anybody could be walking down the street and have this, be victimized in this exact way, and we've got to do something about it.
Well, yeah, in my case, it was very, certainly it was very random, but the HMO that where all these doctors work, have here in 9 years have never changed their prescribing habits. They weren't required then, and they didn't do it. They didn't check. They didn't share a medical file. They didn't talk to each other prior to prescribing these dangerous narcotics, very addictive narcotics. They didn't talk to each other. They didn't check the state's database on prescribing habits. They did nothing in regard to safety.
If you're just tuning in, you're listening to Ledger on the Law, 790 KABC. We're talking about a microcap in place. It's been in place since 1975. It basically protects doctors. It limits the amount of recovery in a medical malpractice case to $250,000. So if a doctor comes in, he's been partying all night, he cuts off the wrong leg, and now you become a double amputee, your net recovery on that case, and it's actually going to be less because of the costs involved in just the prosecution of the case, $250,000. It's horrible law. Bob Pack, because of the loss of his children, has been trying to change the law. Attorney Carl McMahon has been at this since its inception, trying to change the law. Mr. Pack, what do you think your chances are? How's it looking up in Sacramento?
Well, we're taking a two-pronged approach on the micro law. One is the ballot initiative. We have a coalition. We have over a couple $1 million in the kitty right now to get the ballot qualified, and then we'll be mounting a campaign that will promote the bill prior to the November 2014 elections. And so our two-pronged approach is, one, we're drafting the ballot measure to overturn the micro law. We don't want any cap on there. We want juries to decide what is a value of that person and what the family should receive on a case-by-case basis.
God bless the Seventh Amendment. God bless the Seventh Amendment. We need to have juries. And they're often discounted, in all their wisdom, decide what the value is. They sit through the trial. We don't need somebody in Washington who never showed up to court, or somebody in Sacramento make these decisions on what somebody's life is worth or what somebody's injury is worth. It just doesn't make sense. It's an artificial cap.
Let's call it like it is. The insurance companies have been behind this. They're the puppet masters for the doctors. And I don't want to sound harsh, because I'm not for or against any party, whether it's attorneys, doctors, or insurance companies. I'm not for or against any of them. I am for victims and victims' rights. That is it. And they should have the right to get to court and be an award, a compensation award for whatever value the harm or death is worth, and that's how it should work. We shouldn't arbitrarily put in limitations that are so unjustified for victims. So, given that, our second-pronged approach, other than trying to overturn the micro law in California, which we plan to do, we've got a plan to put that in action. The second part is we have talked to the California State Senate. We've been promised a hearing in June by Darrell Steinberg, pro tem, and to bring all the parties together because he wants to explore a Senate bill on MICRA. However, so that is sort of the second tracking avenue of the MICRA law in California.
Well, Mr.
However,
Pack, we're going to absolutely, it's very well said. We want to thank you for coming on the air. We want you to keep us updated.
Yes,
if you could, please, you have an open mic with us. Call back when you have an update and get us filled in. Thank you for appearing on the air with us. I need to take a quick break, but
Yes,
you have been
thank you
through so much. We just want to say God bless to you and to your family.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me, and it's certainly a great topic, and we'll keep the momentum going.
Mr. Pack, Carl McMahon, on a personal note, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart, not only for what you're doing, but on behalf of all the victims of medical malpractice in the state. You're a courageous man, and I thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Carl.
Thank you, Mr. Pack.
Bye
We'll
now.
be right back after a short break. You're listening to Ledger on the Law, 790 KABC. If you want to join the discussion, 800-222-5222. If you're in your car and you have an opinion on this subject, call in now. After I come back, we have Carmen Barber. She's going to be in studio with me to talk a little bit more about this initiative. 800-222-KABC. If you want to join the discussion, I'll be right back.
This is Talk Radio 790 KABC.
Welcome back. Thanks for listening. Ledger on the Law, 790 KABC. If you're just tuning in, we're talking about the microcap out of Sacramento that is diligently handled by competent counsel, attorney Carl McMahon, who is trying to change this law. We've also now been joined in studio with Carmen Belbar, who's the executive director of ConsumerWatchdog.org. You've been up to Sacramento yourself, haven't you, Carmen?
I sure have. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, well, thanks for being here. Tell us from your standpoint. You were actually on the Capitol steps, and they removed you down to for your press conference down to the sidewalk. What went on up there?
Well, we traveled to Sacramento with Bob Pack, my organization, Consumer Watchdog, and almost a dozen other victims of medical negligence, people who lost other children, people who lost their limbs, people who are in wheelchairs for life because of medical negligence, who couldn't hold their doctors fully accountable because of this law. We held a press conference to announce our ballot initiative to force a change in this law that limits victims' rights. Instead of allowing us to speak our piece on the steps of the Capitol, one of the members of the legislature, a doctor himself, kicked us off the Capitol steps, called the Capitol Police, and forced us to the curb. So we had to hold our press conference on the sidewalk outside the Capitol because the politicians in Sacramento don't want to listen to these victims.
And Carl, you told me that there's a lobbyist from the insurance company every week up at Capitol Hill.
Every day,
Every
you said.
day, there's an insurance company lobbyist. I mean, how do we battle the power, the billions? This is a truly David and Goliath story, isn't it?
Well, it is a David and Goliath story, and that's the heck of it, so to speak. Our information, I know from legislative people that I know up there, there's a lobbyist from the insurance industry in Sacramento every day, whether it's at the shoe shine place with the legislator or wherever it is, making sure MICRA stays in effect. That's how much they value this, if you will, boondoggle to the insurance industry. They are making millions and millions and billions of dollars by MICRA's protections at the expense of consumers and victims. That's why they have somebody there every day.
Sounds more like scotch and cigars in the back of a boardroom than at a shoe shine place to me. I think there's a lot of power in the hands of these insurance companies and so much money at stake that there's been some undue influence, so to speak, and hopefully the Consumer Watchdog Group.org KABC.org, along with your law firm, Carl McMahon, can help. I want to remind our listeners, if you're listening and MICRA is not your topic, I see a lot of callers are holding on non-related issues. You can always call the show because we talk about everything legal all the time. 800-222-5222, 800-222-KABC. If you've got a consumer law issue, if you've got a criminal law, real estate law, any other issue, we're focused on MICRA because this is happening in real time. You were on the courthouse steps May 2nd, and there's going to be some more activity in June. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Well, as Bob Pack mentioned, we've asked the leader of the Senate to bring these patients back to Sacramento to talk about this unjust law and how it has impacted them. The reason that matters is because the medical lobby controls Sacramento. In Sacramento, they need to hear from the patients instead of simply the lobbyists for the insurance companies and the doctors who have kept this law the same for the last 75 years.
We don't have a ton of time, but I do want to get to some callers. We've had Ted Holding from Irvine. Ted, welcome to Ledger on the Law.
Hello?
You're on the air, Ted. How can we help?
Yeah. One other aspect which I think is equally unfair besides this cap is that, as you know, a lot of doctors make you sign arbitration agreements. And you could file a lawsuit for $435, but if you have to pay half the cost of an arbitration, then your client's on the hook for 10 or 15 grand. And somehow that should be challenged in legislatively or in some other way.
Yes, hi, Ted. This is Carl McMahon. Thank you for calling. You've hit a topic with me this is part of the MICRA whole umbrella. The arbitration cap, and thanks for bringing it up, came about and has been found constitutional in a case called Madden versus Kaiser. And you're right, it was originally thought to be a cost saver, but it's become extremely expensive, and it's also unconstitutional and a violation of patients' rights.
Ted, thanks for the call.
All right, thank you.
Thanks for calling in, Carl. I want to thank you for all the good work that you're doing. You keep us informed on the subject. I know the studio is going to have you back in, much more to talk about. Carmen, thank you for coming in. Go to consumerwatchdog.org for more. Of course, call attorney Carl McMahon if you have a medical malpractice case. We'll be right back.